Hello, and welcome to the Green Party of Michigan's response to the governor's State of the State message for 2006. My name is Matthew Abel. With me today are Sylvia Inwood, chairperson of the Green Party of Michigan, co-chair of the Detroit Green Party, and the newly elected co-chairperson of the National Women's Caucus of the Green Party of the United States. Also with us is Doug Campbell, who is vice chairperson of the Green Party of Michigan and was the 2002 Green Party of Michigan candidate for governor. Greetings and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sylvia, I know water is one of the primary issues both of the Green Party and of yours personally. I was wondering if you would like to bring us up to date on what you think the state of water issues are in Michigan now.
Well, I can mention a couple of issues. One regarding one of the issues that Governor Granholm campaigned on actually was saving the Great Lakes for the Great Lakes states and her proposed stewardship of the Great Lakes. And a big issue for us in the Green Party of Michigan during the last few years has been a water bottling plant in Mecosta County, Michigan. And when that water bottling plant was just beginning to draw water from the underground aquifers in the area, just at not even close to their full capacity, residents in the area who depended on water from wells found their wells running dry, and they had to dig new wells. What happened is, once the governor was elected, the judge who was presiding over this case of this water bottling facility, he ruled that it should be shut down, and the governor stepped in and made an executive stay to keep the water bottling plant open. She said it had to stay open for jobs, but in fact, the company, Nestle Waters, is getting a huge tax break, and basically we're giving our water away to them so that they can sell it.
And really, there aren't that many jobs because that plant is mostly automated, isn't it?
That is correct. There aren't as many jobs as they promised. The other issue of water is much closer to home for me since I live and work in Detroit. There is a move to privatize the water department in the city of Detroit, which supplies all metro suburban areas around the city. And we see this as a bad move. We already see that the other utility companies, electricity and gas, are privatized, have been privatized for as long as I can remember, and that's not working out too well. They have the power literally to cut off heat and electricity for people who can't afford to pay it. So what could happen here is what's happening in other countries, like in India, where people have to put money into a water meter, and if they don't have the money, they don't get to have water. I think that if the powers that be could do so, they would charge us for the air we breathe. As it is right now, they're just busy polluting it.
Detroit has a living wage ordinance, and we in the Green Party feel that those living wages should be across the board. Doug, do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. The federal minimum wage is a good concept, but it doesn't begin to keep pace with inflation. It is currently $5.15 an hour. It's been unchanged for the past 7 years. In the past 7 years, we've had about 20 or 30% inflation, which is considered the natural growth rate of the economy. If the minimum wage was keeping pace with inflation since its inception, the minimum wage today would probably be $20, $25 an hour.
Which is actually more than what a living wage. I mean, the concept of living wage.
Right, the concept of a living wage is that if you work for a living, you should have enough at the end of the week to pay your basic living expenses.
Makes sense.
And a reasonable number for that might be 150% of the local poverty level. Detroit has passed overwhelmingly at the ballot a living wage ordinance. Unfortunately, it's both not being enforced by the city of Detroit, and the Michigan legislature is currently working on a method to take over local control and make local living wages illegal across the state.
Right, to prevent that from happening.
Yes.
Yeah. Sylvia, I know that the war is not a local or a state issue necessarily. It's more of a national and international issue, but it affects us greatly at home, and I know you have some strong views about the war, and you can represent some of what the Green Party's views are, and I wondered if you might say a few words about that.
Yeah, well, it's true, it's a national issue, but it affects our state and it affects our cities because cities and states are taxed by the federal government. And so we have city money going to pay for the war in Iraq. And that city money that we're sending to the federal government could be going to pay for schools, it could be going to pay for health care, it could be going to create jobs in the city of Detroit, and instead we're helping to fund this war. So it affects us in a very direct way, in addition to the fact that we are sending our sons and daughters over there to fight this war. They're fighting other poor people and other working people. And we need to stop sending our sons and daughters over there.
Absolutely. Doug, do you think the war is all about energy and oil?
The war in Iraq is all about oil. It did not become an issue until Saddam Hussein decided that he would start trading internationally in currencies other than dollars for the oil. As long as he was trading oil in dollars, we were content to leave him to his own dictatorship. We were content to ignore pretty much everything that was going on inside that country. And the only long-term solution to this war is either we pump the region dry, which we will eventually do anyway, that's about a 50 to 100 years time frame, or we start focusing at home on not using so much oil. We start substituting other things, locally grown vegetable oils to run our diesel engines, locally grown alcohol fuels to run gasoline engines, and an across-the-board CAFE standard increase. Like the minimum wage, the CAFE standard, the corporate average fuel economy, has not changed in quite some time. I think the last time it changed was 1984. The CAFE standard could do more to get us out of this war than anything else we could imagine. Since its inception back in the 70s, after the 1973 oil embargo, it has doubled the economy of our car and truck fleet in America. We could increase it again. The technology is there. If you look back 20 years to American cars of the mid-1980s, you'll see that they were greatly outperforming today's offerings in terms of fuel economy. A CAFE bump was introduced in Congress on Capitol Hill a couple of years ago. Ironically enough, the only representative from Michigan to vote for a CAFE standard increase was a Republican. It was Vern Ehlers, thank you.
Congressman Vernon Ehlers.
Congressman Vern Ehlers from the southwest corner of the state was the only one to support this Energy Independence Act.
Right, everybody else thinks that it's going to scare away jobs for some reason. We all, in the Green Party, we believe that creating a better fuel economy, more efficiency, more renewable energy is where the jobs are. And that kind of leads us more into energy and mass transit. We haven't said anything about mass transit, and mass transit is greatly overlooked. In fact, Detroit is the largest city in the United States without a decent mass transit system. There is somewhat of a bus system, but what do you think we can do to improve the mass transit system?
Well, it needs money put into it, certainly. I mean, I've lived in a major city that has a great mass transit system, and moving back here to Michigan, after about 2 years, I had to learn how to drive. And in recent months, I've had to take the bus to work when my car wasn't working. Sometimes I've waited 45 minutes for a bus. I have heard of people waiting 2 and 3 hours for a bus. It's unbelievable in this day and age that we don't have this mass transit. There are jobs in the suburbs that people living in the city of Detroit could go to, but if without a reliable form of mass transit, they can't even go to interview for these jobs, let alone hold down a job.
Governor Granholm campaigned on this issue. It was one of her priorities 3 years ago when she was getting elected. Now that she's been elected, almost nothing has been done on it. There is a regional mass transit committee which occasionally meets and discusses the issue, but there's been no action, at least in southeastern Michigan. I would really hate to see what would happen if it was not one of the governor's priorities. Well, I think it's fair to speculate that the State of the State message will be focused on Michigan's economy. But what I don't think Governor Granholm or anybody in state government is realizing is that Michigan's economy today looks exactly like Seattle's economy looked 30 years ago. 30 years ago, Seattle relied on one industry, and in fact one company, Boeing. They were the prominent industry in Seattle and the lifeblood of the area, and everybody's fortune rose and fell with Boeing's. Well, we're in that same situation here in Michigan with the automobile industry. The response from Lansing is do everything possible to revitalize and expand the automobile industry, and the governor and the legislature are failing to learn the lesson of Seattle. They're failing to look back at history, and what we realize today is that the automobile industry cannot expand any further. It is a stable industry in a saturated market. So the response from Lansing is to give away $600 million of your tax money and mine to Michigan manufacturers, which of course will be targeted mainly at automobile manufacturers, in the hopes that they might provide jobs. Well, this just defies business logic. In business, and the governor would know this if she had ever been employed outside of government, but she has been in government nearly her whole life and is somewhat isolated from this. In business, you only hire somebody to do a job when doing that job makes the business a profit. If you get a cash bonus from the state, that improves your bottom line, but that does not mean that you're going to hire anybody. You only create jobs by creating an opportunity for profit. Now, that same $600 million that was just signed over to Michigan manufacturers could have been used directly by the state to hire 10,000 people for an average $60,000 each. Now, maybe the auto industry is going to expand by 10,000 jobs, but I think we can see the handwriting on the wall that it is stable, it is improving in efficiency, it is producing the same number of cars with fewer hours necessary, and ultimately is going to be responsible for fewer jobs. We are never going to be back to the heady days of the 50s and 60s when the automobile industry made the whole region prosperous. We need to start diversifying, and the very first thing we need to do is not sending good money into a rat hole.
I mean, the governor talks about wanting to keep jobs in Michigan and attract jobs to Michigan, and one of the problems is that the cost of health care is going up, and the employers can't cover it, and it's getting passed on to the workers.
Right, and the employers are shedding their some of their health care coverage.
And for pensions for retired workers. I mean, we are the only industrialized nation in the world that doesn't have a government public health care plan.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. It's amazing. It's like we're living in the Stone Age.
The Green Party of Michigan is active. We're looking for people to join us, to become candidates and volunteers, and to help us in every way, to help us all. And if you have access to the web, you can go to www.migreens.org. That's migreens.org. And you can get links to local organizations, to the national group, and to find out a little more about the Green Party platform. There are more than 2 political parties in Michigan. The last election, there were 7 political parties. There are 2 major parties, and all the rest are minor parties. Now, seems to me that's not exactly what I consider equal protection, but that's the way the law is in Michigan, and we urge you all to investigate it. You won't see us on the primary ballot because we're not a major party. We nominate by convention, but you will see our candidates on the general election ballot, and we urge you to vote for them. And one thing we haven't talked about at all today is campaign finance reform. But there is a great organization, the Michigan Campaign Finance Network, that catalogs and investigates different campaign finance violations. And the reason that legislation is not getting passed that supports people is that the legislators are being paid by the lobbyists. And we need to get the lobbyists out of government in every level.
Green Party candidates are taking the lead on this by individually refusing to accept PAC money, Political Action Committee money, refusing to accept soft money, and refusing to accept corporate money. Only by accepting funding only from individuals can we say that we're on your side? And the Republicans and Democrats cannot make this claim because they are, in fact, funded from everywhere else except we the people.
Bought and paid for.
Yes, they are.
And we want to stop the war.
Yes, and we want to stop the war.
And Sylvia and Doug and I want to stop the war, and any of you who want to join us, please do so.
But we have to keep making noise.
Absolutely.
And letting Washington know that we're unhappy about it.
Congress continues to provide funding for this war with almost unanimous votes in the House and Senate. So certainly by undermining the funding for the war would be a clear message. But we don't have that. We don't have that from the Republicans. We don't have that from the Democrats. Last June there was an additional appropriation put through, an emergency appropriation of 535 legislators on Capitol Hill. We only found 27 who would oppose it. The vast majority of Republicans and Democrats alike are in favor of this war. The Green Party is on your side. If you really feel strongly about this, contact us. We find that sometimes writing your elected representatives is not as effective as we'd like, so we invite you to be your elected representative. It's easier than you think, and we can provide the party resources to support you doing that.
We have just about 1 minute left, and we really need to wrap up. Sylvia, is there something you'd like to encourage our audience to do or to see in the next year?
Protest this war as often and as vocally as you can.
That's a good thought. Doug?
I'd like to remind people that there are more than two political parties. The Republican and Democratic agendas are getting closer and closer every year on the war, on the economy, on everything that directly affects you. There is becoming less and less difference between the two major parties. This is why the Green Party of Michigan and the Green Party of the United States exist. It's no easy task building a new political party. Ask anybody who's done it. But we have done that. We are here. We exist. And we'd like your support to advance our agenda, your agenda, in Washington and in Lansing.
Thanks, Doug. You've been watching the Green Party of Michigan response to the governor's State of the State message for 2006. For Sylvia Inwood and for Doug Campbell, I'm Matthew Abel. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you at the polls.